Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining me, Tara Mishral, for another episode of the Women's Spotlight. As you know, every month I bring to you a woman who's up to phenomenal things, who has pushed past her fear and stepped into expansion. This month is no different. I am super excited to be here with one of the mentors that I've worked with along the way, and her name is Juliana Diaz. Juliana, thank you for being with us today.
Oh, thank you so much, Tara. It really is an honor. Thank you for inviting me.
It is my pleasure, and I'm sure our listeners' pleasures. So everyone out there, I am really excited because Juliana has been through a tremendous amount of growth in her life. She started off as a psychotherapist, helping people in general, and wanted to get more into an ontological type of work and focus more predominantly on women. As she went through that journey, she decided to focus again in on immigrant women to Canada, specifically those from the Spanish or Latin background, because Juliana Diaz is from Colombia originally. She brings with her that rich heritage, that fluent Spanish language, and really an understanding of how hard it is to pick up and start over in a new country with a different community, different language, and all of the above. With that, Juliana's also experienced trauma in her life, as many of us has. And we're going to talk a little bit today about overcoming trauma, such as sexual trauma, body distortion issues, divorce, and reinventing yourself after divorce. So many juicy topics. So buckle up. Here we go. So, Juliana, I met you, gosh, what was it, like 7, 8 years ago?
Yeah, almost a decade, Tara.
Almost a decade. We are too young to be almost a decade of knowing each other, right?
Right.
That's okay. We're embracing our aging process. But I remember being at this retreat and we were doing some inner engineering, and I was so amazed by your light. You just shine so bright and you were so kind. I remember you picked me up that day. You didn't even know me.
Yeah, we carpooled.
We carpooled on this 2.5-hour journey, never met before, and we had a wonderful time. So that always tells me that you're good people. If you can just pick up a stranger and chat for 2.5 hours and still talk almost 10 years later, that's a good sign, right?
Back and forth. It was like 6 hours, really.
6 hours, that's right. And I learned so much about you. So, I honor your transparency. I honor your ability to share, and I honor your authenticity. And that's really why I wanted you to be here today. Those are such important traits. When you think about walking with integrity and walking with authenticity and sharing your story to help others, what comes up for you? Tell me what that does for you.
Okay. So it's not easy. And when you have a past as, in society's eyes, as messed up as mine, it brings up a little bit of anxiety at the beginning. And when I began this process, it didn't make it any easier. No matter how much education and all these certifications and everything I've been doing, and all this experience helping others, when it's you feel it. I'm a human being, right? And what's so wonderful as I continue to share my story, and I do try to be as transparent as possible, is that whatever shame and guilt and negative connotations had been placed there without me even knowing, and that's usually the way it happens, right? We have all these belief systems and stuff that are engineered inside of us after birth, right? As we continue to grow and our minds continue to collect information and we start to figure out how to navigate the world, we start to create these labels and things. And so for me, it's been truly a catalyst for my own healing, being able to share my stories, because there's in many different areas, and being able to connect with other beings who are in pain, who are in that midst of chaos, and holding their hand and showing them the way. And that's what's so great about mentorship is that it's not like in psychotherapy where it was just sitting down and having a conversation and maybe telling people this is what you got to do, number 1, 2, and 3. That's kind of what the philosophy is behind that psychotherapy a lot of times. But this more ontological approach, as you know, Tara, it's much more enriching, and it's a beautiful dynamic of give and take as the giver and as the receiver. So as I'm guiding and holding hands with these powerful beings who are ready to move forward into their journey, to not have to live the same way they've been living, like in a hamster wheel, just going on with their cycles. For me, it's been an absolute honor to be walking with women that are, wow, they really inspire me, and they inspire me to continue to do more and to give more. So it's been beautiful. It's been a beautiful process for me.
That's amazing. And so now you consider yourself working more as a mentor than in a psychotherapy type of role. Tell us a little bit about how you even got into psychotherapy in the first place, and then how you transitioned out.
Wow, that's a story I haven't thought about in a long time, actually. It's a little dramatic, but let's
You're
see.
okay with a little drama.
Just sure, right? Why not? So I think, in those high school years when you're trying to figure out, your guidance counselor is trying to ask you, like, what do you want to do? And everything. I remember I loved chemistry and I loved biology, and my dad really wanted me to be a dentist. And so, because you make good money and it's a good career. And so for much of my childhood, I never really thought what I wanted to do. I just figured that I'd do what my dad wants me to do, because I was daddy's girl. Like, my dad was everything for me. So I just wanted to please him. A perpetual people pleaser. Actually, I'm a triple P. So, but I didn't know these things.
You're making a note to come back to the people pleaser part.
Oh yes, the triple P. That's the big one. So, but at that time, I didn't know. I just knew that I liked being with people, but I was actually bullied for a lot of my childhood, severely bullied, where my self-esteem was pretty much on the floor. So being around people wasn't necessarily something that I had top of mind, but it was always something that whenever I had like the experience of seeing the underdog kind of situation, do you know what I mean? Like, it could be in anything. It could be watching a commercial or whatever it might be, or watching someone on the playground that also was being bullied. There was something in me that wanted to come out and protect them and help them. And I think maybe it was because I didn't have it myself. So whenever I saw someone else that kind of was in need, I felt like there was this innate passion in me that just wanted to come out. And since I didn't control it, of course, it came out like a lioness, right? Like, to protect. So all these things were kind of in my subconscious. So on a trip when we went back home to Colombia, I was right in that grade 12 era. So here in Ontario, I don't know where people are watching from, but in Ontario back in those days, you had to do grade 13, which was OAC, Ontario accredited credits. So
we were in the same boat. Yep.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, it was like that year before university, and you had to get really good grades because according to that, the universities would accept you and everything. So I was right. It was that summer. So grade 12 had finished, and I was about to start grade 13. And I still didn't really know what I was going to do. I just took science and math because I just thought that I'll need that, but I didn't know for what. And we went to visit my great aunt, my mom's. So yes, my great aunt. I had never met her before in my life. We went to a part of Colombia I had never been to before. And her name was Luisa. When I think of her, my God, my heart just expands when I think of her. She was this like 90-year-old lady who had been paralyzed from the neck down since the night of her wedding. So she didn't have an issue. She didn't have a stroke, or she didn't have anything like that. What happened was that the terror she had of her wedding night, because she didn't know about sex or anything. I mean, this is what it was like back in the day, terrified her so much that she was just paralyzed. And she'd been like that for 70 years. So when we went to go visit her, she was in this old people's home, It was really run down. And it was my first experience with an environment like that. And to be honest with you, I think I was really traumatized. It was run also by a religious group. And that just made it worse, because when I saw how horrible the conditions were, there were like 70 little old ladies running around, half of them half naked. It was just like it was like the worst mental hospital you can imagine. Like, that's kind of the feeling I had.
Mm-hmm.
And I went into that lioness, like, where's the justice of like, I just went into a rampage. I remember my parents were like, what's wrong? She's gone into like some sort of psychotic rage, because I connected so much to her. And I just have to share this one moment with her that has always stuck with me. So my mom and my dad and everything, they went to go and talk to the management to talk about, this horrible things that we were seeing unfold. And my mother said, just sit with her. Just sit by her bedside. I've never met this woman in my life. I don't know what to talk to her about. I'm 17 and I'm sitting there. So I'm holding her hand, like that just came innately to me, just kind of like softly hold her, right? And then she turns around and she just says to me, God is so good to me. I'm so blessed. I'm so grateful. And I'm looking at her like, are you kidding me? You've been like, your husband took off on you after that wedding night. He obviously didn't stay with her or nothing. So she's been reclused for 70 years, paralyzed completely. Like, she can't use her hands, nothing. And she's literally, and that's why they went to go talk to management, she's literally laying in her own filth.
Wow.
So I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, just can't. Like, how can you say that? And then she says, you know what? For like 68 years, I haven't been able to move my body. And 2 years ago, I started to be able to use my left hand. God is so good. I left in tears. You can imagine. I left in tears. Something exploded inside of me. Sorry? Yeah.
It rocked you. It really had an impact.
Something popped inside. It was almost like I could feel something just exploded inside of my chest.
Yep.
And it just came to me. So as I walked out into the hallway, my parents were coming back in. I was like, this cannot happen anymore. This is an outrage. And that woman is a saint that's laying there. And I'm never going to let this happen again to anybody in the world. Again, the idealistic, child's mind of I'm going to stop all this from happening. But what came very clear is I'm going to be a psychologist, or I'm going to study psychology, and I'm going to open up my own old people's home, and I'm going to help all the old people. But there's this passion that drove me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how it came into my head. And I came home, I signed up for the psychology department at York University as a science degree. I'm like, I'll stick with the sciences, but like, that's what my specialty is going to be. And that's what I'm going to do. And I've never looked back.
What a story.
It was so honest. And so I've never doubted that is what I want to do with my life.
Mm-hmm.
So from there, my fear of speaking with people and connecting with them and being vulnerable and sharing who I am and all my mistakes and all the things that I've gone through, I don't know, they sort of just melted away because it's not about me anymore. Mm-hmm. And I had now a new focus, and it's like my heart opened in a way that I don't think anything else like that could have, no books, no guidance counselor, no nothing else could have really opened me up to that passion like that experience.
Yeah. And for me, like, I call that tapping into your heart wisdom, right? Our ancestral wisdom, the real truth. Logic serves us quite a bit, but in that moment, you tapped into your heart center, your passion, your truth, and then you lived it. And that was your truth at the time. And I really can identify with the bullying and what that does to you, because many people saw me as a bully, but they didn't see why I went into protection mode of others. It was because I was bullied, because I was called hippo, and because I was made fun of, that I decided, like you, we're going to protect the world. Yes. Thing is, with me anyways, as I was protecting everyone around me and fighting for what I thought was justice, I stopped fighting for myself and my inner child. I feel like I lost her a little bit. Did you, when you were fighting for everyone, did you remember to fight for yourself?
No, so you took the words right out of my mouth. I feel like you're speaking about me as well. That does happen because I think we go into this survival mechanism. So we go on to survival mode for others and ourselves. And it seems like you can see the pain in everybody else, but you don't have time for your own pain, right? Like, I got to make this happen. I got to, right? And because, again, maybe going back to that people pleaser part, because I had this huge desire and need really at that time to have people see that I'm worth something and that I can give them something. And hopefully once I can give them something, then they'll love me kind of process. I became all consumed in just helping everybody else. And that's probably what brought on in my early adulthood. That's probably what brought on all the other stuff, the eating disorder, because the eating disorder is all about, not loving myself and not seeing any value in what I have. And so for me anyways, it was a way of punishing myself whenever I tried to.
Whipping on the back, right? Keep beating yourself.
Oh, yeah. It was a way of punishing myself.
Mm-hmm.
Because even with my eating disorder, I wasn't the prototype of going and binge eating and then, eliminating in whatever fashion. For me, I would eat like half a cracker, and that would, so I didn't even get to enjoy like, ooh, the tub of ice cream. No, it was just like, there was so much self-loathing inside of me. And I think it just combined with also my view of the world as being so aggressive and so yucky, right? That everything needed to be saved. And I couldn't save everybody. So that just kind of added on to that. See, you're not good enough. You're not doing enough. You're not right. And so there was this constant, like you said, this constant like whipping myself in the back to be able to whip myself back into shape. I got to keep pushing. And when you keep pushing like that, you break just like anybody else. And when you have no one around you to support you and maybe, nudge you a little bit and say, hey, Juliana, want to take a step back here and take a look at some really self-destructive things I'm noticing about you. You hide it, right? You hide it because you don't want anyone to tell you either. And that brought about, probably putting myself in situations where I shouldn't have been and brought on even more trauma in my life. But if I'm honest, they were all massive opportunities for transformation for me. I don't think I would be the woman I am today and the being I am today, and being able to tap into that heart wisdom without those events in my life.
Fascinating. So I just want to touch on something you just said about not having someone to call you on what they're seeing. For all of you out there listening, it is so important that you share your truth with the ones you love, right? Your friends, it's important that if you notice something, as opposed to just placating them or making them feel good about themselves, be honest with them, give them space. Even just asking someone how they're really doing can give them space to open up and share that instead of pulling and keeping it inside. And then for you, that anger inside or that hurt inside or that alienation or abandonment or alonement, whatever it was you were feeling, you didn't feel like you deserved to nourish your body and eat. You didn't feel like you deserved anything.
Right.
So when you say you then had a break and you're appreciative of that break, but what did that, I've kind of changed my language a bit. Instead of saying I had a breakdown, I always say I got cracked open, right?
Yes.
I like cracked open and then somehow light came in and rebuilt me. And now I've learned from whatever trauma it is. But whether you feel like you had a breakdown or that breaking moment, or in my case, the cracking open, what did that look like for you? And how did you get through it?
It looked like a car wreck. And I'm going to be very honest. And a lot of people, I think, when they hear us talk about, that it can be a breakthrough, that it's not all unicorns and rainbows. It's not like all of a sudden I just, and like some light came down and I have wisdom.
Yeah.
99.9% of the time, it sucks so bad. It sucks so bad. And because it allows for you to really see yourself. Like you said, you crack open. So it's like cracking an egg, letting it fall on the floor and everything's everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's a mess. And then you have to, where do you start? Like you start from this corner, everything gets, your hand gets dirty and you're like, this is gross. I'm going to start from this other corner. And it can be that way. It can many ways bring more chaos into your life. Mm-hmm. Before it even begins to have any semblance of, I see the light at the end of the tunnel. So my cracking point lasted like 15 years, maybe 20. I mean, to be honest with you, it was decades for me. I'm very stubborn as well. And in my self-destructive nature, and doing a lot of inner work. And there came a point where I realized I need help. And then I was not shy at all at asking for help from everybody. So I would find a new life coach, or I'd find a mentor, or I'd find a psychologist, and I always wanted to find out if they had like something that I could take with me and begin that process of healing. And so it started off, I think, with like the self-esteem issues and the bullying issues. And through university, there were a few really hard deaths in my immediate family. My father left my mom. He left for Colombia after he retired and married her without divorcing my mother here. I mean, it was like a mess. Like so that was a mess. And then my mother was really just in chaos herself. And then he took all the money that supposedly was supposed to pay my university. And so then I had to get like 3 jobs, and like it just kept piling on. I thought, give me a break. Like something's got to give here. Mm-hmm. But it was there to build my resilience. And it was there, I think, to show me where my weak spots were, and to stop using my self-defense mechanisms, which, my survival mechanisms, which I think help me sometimes when I am in really, really dire crisis. They kick in and they help me get out of whatever jam I'm in. But right. Then you got to turn them up. You got to turn the volume down after a while. Like you got to go back to some sort of homeostasis. Mm-hmm. I can't be constantly like that. So that constant survival mode is what brought on all the other issues and wanting to escape. And so my 2 marriages, failed marriages and divorces, one right after the other, to be honest with you. Mm-hmm. And then I was raped and assaulted. And so see, even in that moment, talking about that, that was my first near-death experience. And I had some really kind of ethereal experiences that I can't really explain what it is that I had, but it was the first time I began to really ponder, maybe I'm not my body, maybe I'm not my mind, maybe there's something else. And so yeah, they were tough years. I had to report it to the police, and they didn't believe me. And then you have like cross-examination attorneys, like in CSI, like, is it true? Did you want it? Did you dress sexy? And like all this accusatory stuff, and you're sitting there, I think I was 26 or 27 at that time, but I had maybe the emotional maturity of a much younger person, because I was so sheltered in my home life that for me, all this it's like putting a 12-year-old in a courtroom, and you're like, I don't even know how to defend myself. What's going on? Why are you accusing me? So
right. And let's just take a moment, right? Let's take a moment and let's just sit in everything you just said. Right.
It's a lot, I know.
Yeah. And there's so many of us out there that have had that feeling of overwhelm, of one thing after the other keeps breaking in our life. People we love keep dying. People we love keep leaving. We keep losing. And sometimes when you're in that moment, to hear God won't give you more than you can handle makes you want to say, shut the front door or something else, right?
Yes,
It's
exactly.
not a good feeling, because when you're in the trenches and you are clawing your way out of the mud, and every foot you put is just sinking deeper and you feel like it's quicksand,
Yes,
these beautiful phrases don't help us. It's not the rope we need.
exactly.
The
Exactly.
rope we need is not even mindset. That comes after the fact. When we are in that, we need to work our way through it. We need to embrace the pain and we need to breathe through it. And that is so hard when
Yes,
we feel like something else is going to knock us down.
exactly.
So
Exactly.
I completely acknowledge all of that you went through. And our trauma out there may not have the exact same storyline as yours,
Yeah.
but all of us are experiencing some type of trauma, or we have in our past, that we need to work through. Yours versus what's happening in war-torn countries versus what's happening with people who are sex trafficked versus what's happening with athletes who lose their career versus what's happening with, people who get hurt in a car accident. There's no scale to
No.
say, hey, your trauma is worse than mine. It's all the same response. Our body neurologically goes into fight, flight, or freeze, and we stay at that elevated level. And as you said, if we stay up there too long,
Yes.
we lose the ability to really manage our physical state. And that's when sickness steps in.
Yes.
And that's where the metaphysical sometimes steps in. And so I just want to really acknowledge that. The other thing I really want to acknowledge is when you talk about rape, and then you talk about the aftermath of the rape, that's sometimes as bad, if not worse, isn't it?
Yes, it was. It
So
is.
when
Yeah.
our bodies are taken for granted, mutilated almost, right? Let's call it what it is.
Yeah. Mhm.
We're losing something in that moment, and we try to regain a piece of dignity by sharing the truth about it,
Yes.
and then we're meant to relive the saga. So for any of you out there who've been through that, I just want to hold space for you right now. I just want to, send healing, loving energy. And if you're not through it, you will get through it. If you are just fighting through it, I highly suggest you do talk to someone and you let that pain out, because it hides in the crevices of your body and it creeps up when you least expect it. So thank you for being brave enough to speak out and to deal with what came after. So after, when you had to deal with all these questions, what was your next step? How did you move forward from that?
So I think what you just said is right on point. There's only so much clawing you can do to get out of the hole, and there comes a point where you're so full of mud that like you can't, and you need to find a different way. And I do think that in our society we are taught that that either our minds are this wonderful intelligent tool that we should adhere to everything it says to us, or it's this monkey mind and you have to kind of keep it to one side. But in truth, nobody ever really teaches you how your mind, it can actually be a beautiful tool when it's used in combination with all the other aspects of you. And it's wonderful how you incorporate, and you mentioned this, and I do this as well, is that you do need to feel your emotion. Our society, and I don't know why us women specifically, well, men do it as well, but we try to push through the pain and the doubts and the worries and all the stuff that we have inside for another day, because I don't have time for that right now. And this is not serving me right now because I need to get all these things done. And it's amazing how we use distraction to our detriment, right? We think, well, I'm just going to sit and watch TV for 2 hours and I'm just going to relax. Is it really relaxing you? Maybe your body might be sitting there, but the turmoil is still in there, right? It's still inside. Your heart is still in crisis.
Yes.
And there needs to be a connection between that mind, body, and soul and heart, so that you can bring it all together and you can begin to look at that broken egg on the floor and say, okay, I'm going to start by the yolk. And and you do, and it takes strategy. But it doesn't take strategy of like, let me just list 1, 2, and 3 of the things I got to get done. We got to move away from that kind of paradigm. And we need to now look at ourselves when we're looking for healing. It has to happen as a whole. Absolutely. And the only way you're going to know what's happening as a whole is by just sitting quietly and just watching, becoming the witness of your life, of your moment. Is the most masterful thing you can do. And I know it feels probably for some of you might be like, and it does for me sometimes because I'm such a hyper person. Sitting there is productive. Yes, and it is. And it's not just sitting there. There's so much that's happening under the skin. There's so much that's happening. And having trust that your body already knows what to do. We just haven't given it the time to heal itself. We're just pumping it with so many things and actions, and I got to work out and I got to do this and this movement and this stimuli and this pill and this, massage and this, whatever it is. And we never just sit there to listen. Our bodies are absolute masters to send us the messages of what's really happening to us. And you said that earlier as well. And it happened to me as well, is you don't listen and your body is it's the last resort that your true being has to say, listen, this chick's just not listening. So I'm just going to have to put on the brakes, and you go flying into the windshield. Like,
I'm just going to shut her down.
Yeah, exactly. Because she's not
don't want to listen.
Exactly. So you don't, and that's where I think in my 20 years of trying to heal myself, it kept happening to me. I kept slamming in. And then, I get a little bit of like, okay, I'm back, after I've been unconscious or I have a concussion, okay, I'm okay. And I go back into it because, and so that's where I think a lot of people tend to do. So they'll have a traumatic event, a divorce, a separation, a death, whatever it might be. They get the chance to sit there and maybe contemplate a little bit, but then they don't know what to do with that contemplate. They're like, okay, because when you sit still, man, do you get a lot of information. It just comes, especially if it's been years of stuff like accumulating, and then you don't know what to do with it. It's overwhelming.
I can't tell you how on point that is for me, because we hear a little bit, especially out here in the spiritual world, about downloads, right? And people don't always understand what that means. It can mean whatever you want it to mean. It can mean a download from a greater source. It can even mean a download from your soul. It can be a download of information that has been blocked. But when you put your vagus nerve to rest and you just like have everything calm, that's where it opens up the space for new information to come through. And whether you're a spiritual person or whether you are heavily corporately driven, even the great Napoleon Hill said, take a nap during the day. You need time for the masterfulness and the collective consciousness to come in. So either side is saying take time. Now, that doesn't mean you have to sit and meditate.
No, doesn't have to be
quiet for 10 days like I did, right? I remember I had my stroke and I went back to work at like 3 days after I got out of the hospital. I was in the hospital for a week or so. And I had my little cane and I'm like walking around. I'm like, I'm going to work. And I went hard. I think it was for like almost a month. And then I had to stop myself and say, what am I doing? And I went complete polar opposite, and I did a 10-day silence meditation retreat and studied Vipassana. And you're right. I would take walks in the woods to like unwind all the stuff that was coming up for me. And I remember crying at the birds because we're not allowed to talk to anyone, right? I was like crying with the birds. And I'm like, ah. But once I got it all out, I put that cane down and I never picked it up again. Once I got out all that pain, all that disappointment, all of that stuff the universe was trying to tell me to listen to before I just had this stroke out of nowhere, it gave me space for new possibilities to arise. So I really honor what you're saying.
Yeah.
And so through all of this, is that how the mentorship work started for you? Is that when you finally dug into the mentorship work?
Yeah, I'll tell you, because I took a time out from psychotherapy. So I did my education, I graduated, I got my certification and started to do, so I did psychotherapy for several years. And then I just felt like there's something missing here. So just talking about stuff, there's something massively missing. There was no transformation. Everything it was like molasses. Everything was such a, your hours up, and I felt like they are leaving, and I'm like, oh my God, I need to take you for 4 days intensive, like to really start to break, to crack open. And so I was kind of disappointed. And then a lot of more stuff started to happen to me, and the rape and everything else. And so I felt like I had to take a step back. I wasn't in any place really. If I wasn't giving myself space, how could I possibly hold space for anybody else to do any transformation? So again, there was this wisdom that happened to me because I wasn't aware of it, but I was kind of guided to do everything. I needed to take a break. So I stepped back from that, and I did everything else you can imagine, Tara. I went into the business world. I was a mortgage broker. I moved to the States. I did R&D for a software company. I basically kind of done everything. Then I got into the fitness industry. I became a yoga instructor, and then I became a general manager at a fitness facility, and it went on. And I got back into that hamster wheel, right? If I just keep going, everything will be all right. And then, like everything, the little voice started, hey, don't forget what you love to do.
Yes.
Right? It's not all about paying your bills. It's not right. And so for me, really, what really happened was that, there was this, I had started to learn how to meditate, and I had started to do all this like years ago. And it's really the people that came into my life and started to send me like little tidbits, right? So I started to learn and take like little tools. And because I started to begin to give me that space, that little voice started to get a little louder and a little louder and a little louder, until finally I was like, well, how do I do this? Like, how do I live off of this? How do I go back? I haven't done psychotherapy in decades. But you know what? When I really sat down and I saw how all my experience and all the coaching I've done, because I was a manager and a director. I owned a brokerage. I mean, there was all this mentoring I was already doing, but I didn't consider that. I just thought, I was just helping people. I was just, sitting there and talking to employees for hours on end. And, actually in one of my last clubs, one of the HR managers came up to me one day and said, how come you have such high turnover? Like with your salespeople, whatever. And why is because they'd sit, like I'd hire them. And then, over the months I'd be like, what are you doing here? Because you shouldn't be here. You should be this and that. And I'd start coaching them to start looking inside themselves. What brings you joy? What brings you passion? You're here. Yeah, you're doing your 1, 2, 3s. And I appreciate it. I love you for it. But the mentor in me, right? So not the manager, but the mentor in me was like, fly, little bird, like, please fly, because you have all this potential. And I want you to fly. Yeah. And that's why I told him, I said, I can't help it. I can't help it. And more I kept getting evidence that I just had to begin to have trust that little voice was really my real voice. And it was that wisdom coming from my heart and from wherever else, from divine, from the universe, say, it's now time. You've matured, you've healed, you've done the work. You're still doing the work, because it never stops, to be honest.
Never stops. Nope. If you don't think that the work you've done is done, you're just getting started.
Oh, and you know what? And we have bad days just like everybody else.
Oh,
and
yeah.
There are days where I forget to meditate. And there are days where I go off the handle and freak out at someone. And then I'm like, oh my God, what did I do? Because we're human beings and we're living the same experiences. We're living in the same world. It's just that hopefully we've learned to take a step back. We become a little bit more aware of those red flags before they get too explosive, let's say.
Yes, absolutely. And just on that, right? It's not everybody's meant to be a mentor, but when you have a calling to coach, to mentor, to lead others, you have to listen. At some point, it becomes such a loud knock. And that shows up in a variety of ways. Some people are called to be leaders and they still work in the sanitation department. And some people are called to be leaders and they're CEOs, and some are coaches.
Yep.
I personally, people ask me all the time, how do you fit in being a regional VP and leading and coaching a team there in the corporate world, do this and then do the coaching? And it's because it's so important to me. So I find time, I diversify my portfolio, and it helps me feel whole to have all these different elements, because when I really break it down, I was born to lead. It is what makes me most happy. I was born to mentor and to coach. And I see that light in you as well. And does that mean we don't need coaches and mentors? No, I have a wonderful coach that I work with, every 2 weeks. And I have wonderful guides that I work with. And that, that downward connection with them helps me provide downward connection to others, and vice versa, right? So it is so important, and we're happy that you're doing the work. And I know you've got a couple of programs coming up. So can you tell me a little bit about your 12-week mentorship program and your retreat in September?
No, thank you. The 12-week breakthrough 3-month container, I know it sounds like a mouthful, but it's basically a 3-month package to work with clients, mentorship clients that really are ready to do some deep diving into self-discovery. And so everything that we've talked about today, and it doesn't have to be that traumatic either. For a lot of people, sometimes, they're going through their lives, nothing really major has really, they haven't had like any major blips in their lives or anything like that, but they start to realize like something's off, like I'm not fully happy, and they can't, their mind can't make sense of it, because they have maybe the house with the white picket fence and the dog and the car and everything. They should be like, I should be super happy. I have everything that supposedly I'm supposed to have, and it's supposed to make me happy. But they know that there's something they're missing. So a lot of my clients aren't necessarily going into full trauma healing. For that, I believe there needs to be more specific type of strategy. So this 12-week or 3 months is basically a starter package to work with me privately, one-on-one, once a week. So it's very frequent, because what it is trying to really find your basics and your personal journey, your personal tools, the way you can navigate what's happening in your moment to moment. And what are the tools that you're going to use so that you can be observant and begin to watch and try to be really aware of what are the mechanisms that click in and some of the automatic pilot things that are happening for you. And so I don't know if it's happened to you, Tara, sometimes with your coaching, but they'll come for a session, and then people sometimes expect like one session is going to do it, and it really isn't. And what I've seen is that by providing a foundation and a kind of strategy right off the bat with a client who's looking for some clarity, who's looking to really feel a bit more fulfilled and understand, how do I make decisions for myself properly? How do I know that I'm making decisions from the right place and not from maybe some limiting beliefs and things like that? It's important to have that support, and all I do really is I just kind of guide you, right? That's what's different with this. It's a little bit more collaborative. So I'm not telling you, you're telling me, right? And I know that you work the same way too. It's like, let's find out what your truth is inside of you. And for a lot of people, it's the first time they've ever even asked that question, right?
Yes.
So this 3-month mentorship plan is a really safe container where we can begin to make those little cracks in a safe environment with some support, and with the frequency that I think is really important, because moment to moment, things are shifting and changing. And we want to make sure that whatever progress that person starts to have, they don't start to fall back. And you can usually know within a couple of days whether, whatever aha moment they had, they reverted back into their old habits. And so sometimes we do need a little hand holding through the way.
And that really happens. That's part of the growth. Is I've noticed that with everybody I've worked with, you have a spring forward and then a little glitch back, and then a spring forward and a little glitch back. And it's basically the subconscious mind fighting to keep you safe, and keeping you safe means keeping you in the way that you've always done things. So when you're trying to get up to big things, part of you is pulling you back, saying, wait, let me self-sabotage a bit because you're not ready for all of that. Come back here in safe zone. You know how to deal with the hurt and the pain. You don't know how to deal with being number one, or with finding the love of your life, or being the body you want, or having multiple properties, or having money. You know what it's like to be the opposite. So I agree with you. Consistent work is very critical to overturning those things. And so I invite all of you to take a look at Magda's 3-month course, because you really do need that amount of time to make a change or an impact in your life. The other thing I really love about what you said is that you're not providing the answers. You're pulling the answers out. And no matter whether or not you think you have the answers, all of you have the answers. There's not one person that's better than the other. We all make choices, and the choices illuminate the path we're going to have in life, but it doesn't mean anyone is better or worse than us. And I know that's scary to think of, because you're like, what do you mean? Elon's not better than me, or or someone, someone's not worse than me. No, it's the choices we make. And so having some consistent time with a coach or a mentor helps you make the right decisions in alignment with your goals. So we're coming to time, but just real quickly, you also have a 1-day retreat.
Yes.
And that, can you just tell us real quick, like that's 1 day, where it is, like, and how much, and then we'll put all the information in with this email out to our inner circle, and they'll get all of the deets.
So it's a local retreat, just on the outskirts of the GTA. It's at just north of Toronto, Musselman's Lake. Nice. It's a very intimate retreat, only 10 people, so only 10 spaces are available. And I do this on purpose because I really want that, because it's only a day, I want it to be as intimate and as connective as possible. And it'll be on September 10th from 11 to 8 p.m. It's a beautiful location, so right near the water. We are going to be doing awareness workshop, which we kind of touched a little bit on today, like understanding your mental blockages, how to be aware of it. And not only how do I be aware, but what do I do with it? What do I do with this awareness? There'll be a wonderful dance yoga instructor who's coming in, Sherry. She does this. She's created her own kind of module, which is beautiful. Breath work, guided meditations, inner child, which I know you, too bad we're out of time, but man, that's like another big topic with me, the inner child work. So we'll be doing a workshop for that. And we also have an amazing heart imagery teacher. And she does all this kind of anchoring of that knowledge into your heart and connecting with that heart wisdom. So it's going to be a beautiful day, very intimate, almost like coming to a friend's house.
I love it.
Yeah, I'm going to be making all the meals myself, believe it or not. So,
that's amazing.
So it's really homemade, just really down to earth, and hopefully in such a loving environment that it's going to help give you that space to be able to open up and crack open it, like you said.
Amazing. So I hope all of you check that out. And, I will have you back and we'll talk about inner child, because you could go on with inner child for days.
Yes.
But unfortunately, today our time is coming to a close. So before you go, I always end on an important question. Speaking of inner child, if you could sit down with your inner child or go back and tell your younger self something that you've learned throughout all of these years of growth and somewhat difficult times, what would it be?
Give yourself space. I think that is the most important thing. And as we've been growing up and as children, we're not taught to do that. We're taught to be distracted all the time. And so giving yourself space and talking to yourself is really important to do. And I think the one last thing too, for everybody, rediscover what brings you joy. And you'll find that sometimes it's the most simple, silliest of things, but those are the things that that open your heart the most and are absolutely doable daily for you. Pet your dog, I don't know, hug your kid, have a really yummy oatmeal in the morning, whatever it is that really fills you and just makes you feel like, oh, yes. Yeah.
Mhm.
Simple, beautiful, powerful. And that would be, I wish somebody had told me at the
Yeah.
beginning. So,
Me too. The power of doing nothing sometimes, or finding joy in the simplest of things. It's not always in our accomplishments or the great
no.
moments of jumping out of the plane, or it's sometimes in those simple moments of just enjoying a great cup of tea. You know, the Buddha says that enlightenment sits in a cup of tea. So I'm in alignment with that. Thank you so much, Juliana.
My
I
pleasure.
appreciate you being here today. And, we learned a little bit about what happens when we ignore the trauma, when we ignore the pain, when we ignore the feelings, when we want to protect everybody else and we forget to protect ourselves and what we need. And so as we go through those trials and tribulations, a nice reminder from you is to sit in quiet and allow things to process. And we're so happy, and I personally am tremendously proud of what you're creating, and I can't wait to
Thank
see
you.
how it unfolds. I've been watching your journey.
Thank
So
you.
thank you again for being here, and I can't wait to have you back.
Oh, I'd love to. I'd love to. Anytime. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care. And thank you all for listening. It's been a pleasure. Take the time, do the work, but always remember that no matter how tough it gets, you can find a little bit of peace if you just sit in quiet and have that cup of tea.